Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is it recording?
Yeah,
So
we're good.
whenever you're ready.
I'm John Hodijk. I was born and raised in the Netherlands and came here in 1952 as a 20-year-old boy with my mom and my brothers. Uh, we, eventually I found a nice girl. I married her in 1957. She was a former school teacher in the Netherlands as well. So, and we raised 5 children. One day I came home from work and Teddy said, you know, we should start an organization called Pro-Life against abortion. And she said, I saw something in the paper, and the lady's name was Betty Hammond, and said, contact her. So the same day she contacted her, and we went to see her the next day. She had already operated out of her home. She was a mother of 8 children, I think it was. She had a big family. The most beautiful lady, you know, very brave. And that's how it all started. A year later, we had our meetings at our house. We found some more volunteers. There were some teachers from John Coleman Christian School. They volunteered, and that's how it all started. Betty and Teddy they could have been sisters. I mean, they had the same personality. Her husband was a very nice fellow. He worked for Bell Canada. He had a good position there. And they had a beautiful family of young kids. You know, yeah, Betty Hammond. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you end up arranging meetings in the evening in some of the churches where you would ask Dr. Schultens, who was a doctor, to speak and a minister to explain from biblical perspective what is wrong with abortion and what is, you know, what the Bible says about abortion. And we always had lots of people coming to the evenings. You know. And then we also, first 2 or 3 years, we had the meetings at our house on Cedar Springs Road. Eventually, an office was found in Bilton. And then, of course, we didn't have a constitution bylaw, so we worked on that as well with volunteers. The teachers volunteered to do that. And the organization called La Leven, that's in Dutch. It was a big organization of people from Reformed and Roman Catholic background. We exchanged our newsletters, and one day we had a letter from the director if they could copy and translate our constitution bylaws, and they did. One thing that struck me, we were in correspondence with an English group in London, Christian people, fighting against abortion as well. They sent us documented information, and it was documented. A pharmaceutical company in England was collecting baby parts for pharmaceutical soap. I wish I had made a copy of it. It was went all to the office in Hamilton. So, you know, because I explained it the other day to someone at work, you know, also the danger of abortion, and that's wrong as well. I could have proven to him and it's apparently not isolated anymore, neither. It's terrible. If people knew, you know. And what really struck me after the war and the Nuremberg trial, doctors who performed their abortions in a concentration camp, some were killed and some were put in jail for many years. And now it's looked as being normal. You can hardly imagine in human life. Hmm? So, and also we were in contact with Reverend Van Doorn from our church. So one day there was a big Ontario meeting. It was held at the Catholic school in Brent Street. And we had to bring a speaker. So I asked Reverend Van Doorn. He said, do you mind speaking at this afternoon? So I picked him up and I said, you got your speech? He said, yeah, piece of paper. And the title was, Abortion is an Abomination to the Lord. And it's customary among the Catholics, if the priest has a speech, and they appreciate, they all stand up. So he's not used to that. He said, what's wrong with all these people standing? He said, they appreciate what you said. Yeah. For the full house, they came from all over, you know, from all over. Yeah. And of course, euthanasia has taken over now as well. Yeah. Yeah. I should mention maybe the two teachers that, because I wrote some names of those two names I married. Margaret Spithoff and Frances Hartsevort. Well, Frances is married now, so I don't know what, she moved out west. They worked very hard. They were on board right away, you know, helped us all the time. And two people, two brothers, Ralph Shilton and Henk Scholten. Henk is the doctor, and Ralph also chaired the meetings quite often as well. Yeah. Well, I probably leave a lot of people out, but there were so many people helping that we should all get involved. I mean, really, seriously, not just talk about it, but financially involved, support it, and spread the word that abortion is an abomination to the Lord. Yeah.
Good evening, friends of life. I am honored and privileged to be at this gala dinner as the daughter of Betty Hammond, the founder of Halton Pro-Life, today called Halton Alive. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Teresa Momberket. I also acknowledge the presence of my brother Joseph and his wife Kristen and my husband Barry this evening. Our mother was born 2.5 months prematurely in 1923. She weighed only 2 pounds, and her father, a country doctor, kept her alive in a little box near the oven and fed her mother's milk with an eyedropper. Betty's father, Dr. Lowell Dales, founded the Newmarket Hospital, the York County Hospital, the surgery as they called it, in their home. And again, on home territory, Betty founded Halton Pro-Life in our Burlington home in a bedroom above the garage. Betty, who was born 101 years ago, would be so elated to see Halton Alive thriving in the community of Halton 50 years later. In the early days of Halton Pro-Life, my mother was able to see with clarity and foresight the events that were shaping our world. She spoke out about these dangers and did something about them to warn people, whether in the schools, the churches, the community, City Hall, or Parliament. When I see the presence of the horrific evils of our world, I remember that my mom spoke prophetically about this darkness. Mom spoke about the slippery slope, population control, euthanasia, abortion, contraception, all of them being attacks on the family and life. My mom would remark that Halton Pro-Life was her 10th child. In retrospect, this child took much of our mother's time when we were growing up and some of us were far away. Ironically, we would sometimes lament that Halton Pro-Life took our mother and even our catchy phone number that we had because my father worked for Bell, 632-3232. Mom was a night hawk, often working well into the night at home or later all day at the office across from the Burlington City Hall. She was passionate about her faith, the family, and life. My father, too, was an incredible help to my mother, supporting her in her, quote, volunteer role in Halton Pro-Life. As an adult, I clearly see that Mom was building a legacy, a wonder that would continue on well after she was gone. She instilled these true values in her children, as well as the community through this organization. This legacy transformed us. Her 9 children, 26 grandchildren, and now 23 and counting great-grandchildren are actual proof of choosing life so that you and your descendants will live. In my own life, I was expecting at age 22, long before I was married. I chose life and adoption for that first grandchild of my parents, directly as a result of the countless pro-life materials that were all over our home that I read voraciously. And of course, witnessing my mother and father's lives and their involvement in pro-life work. I knew I could have had an abortion, and no one would ever have known, but the foundation of choosing life was powerfully planted in me. My mother just stood up at the time and said, "Congratulations. Every mother should be congratulated." When I revealed that I was expecting, Mom and Dad's continual zeal for life literally saved their first grandchild. In the community, people in all walks of life came to know and understand the pro-life issues because Betty, Mom, constantly put materials into the right hands. She really initiated the networking of Halton Alive, bringing together people of like mind from different walks of life, different faiths, and widely different backgrounds. She was an educator at heart, bringing carefully collated envelopes and materials to school boards, politicians, private individuals, students, clergy, and many in the medical world. Betty was constantly clipping and building tremendous files on all pro-life related issues. And so many of you are here tonight because of Mom's courageous, persevering acceptance of her second vocation. Mom did this pro-life work, lived this pro-life work for God. It was definitely a calling that she accepted through many times of great difficulties. Betty's legacy continues in my family, my husband and my children, my brother's family, and in you here tonight. I encourage you this evening. I even challenge you. How can you get involved in Halton Alive? Bring a friend or a family member to the next Life Talks conference. Help your church to get involved. Pray, give financially, whatever it looks like for you, because we're all part of a legacy that values human life. This is the time we have all been given. Please don't miss the time of your visitation, for indeed God turns all to good for those who love the Lord. Thank you, and I hope you have a great evening.
Hi, my name's Mary Muller, and I was part of Halton Pro-Life from 1986, maybe, after our youngest was probably 1 or 2 years old. And my husband Paul and I have 3 children, John, Sarah, and Eric. And we used to take them out to all the pro-life events. I mean, I think what probably got me started was Moira McQueen. So Moira McQueen was on the board at the with Halton Pro-Life way back. We got really involved, and we found that's where for the first time we really experienced our Protestant brothers and sisters, and we had a wonderful relationship with our evangelical and Protestant brothers and sisters in Christ. And it really taught us a lot about each other. Early on, when my kids were still very young, very little, and I was quite green and I didn't really know very much, Moira McQueen couldn't be there to do a debate once, and the Hamilton Spectator wanted to have a debate, and they wanted to have us and somebody from Toronto who was a pro-abortionist come in and debate us. So it was a huge task, but I just gave it to God, and remember sitting in this room with the interviewer or the lady, the debate person who was asking us the questions, and this other woman. And really, you know, God gave me so many good answers, and the Holy Spirit I was more convicted than ever about speaking out for the unborn. I was also quite shocked when a full page came out with this in the Hamilton Spectator, or my giant picture and the other lady, and there was all this text about different things that we were sparring about. And I think that was kind of the springboard that just kind of launched me into the pro-life movement after that, because I didn't think I had the confidence to do it, but somehow I was able to do it after that. And then, of course, different people on the board, they were fantastic. Gary Smith, longtime board member, as long as I've ever been involved with Halton Pro-Life and Halton Alive. He's been a big part of that, recently deceased. Ralph Schultens, and of course his brother Jack, very, very involved. And they were all just so instrumental and so helpful in understanding everything about what we needed to do, but also encouraging us to get involved in more ways. So that's when I would go out and do speaking engagements like Respect Life Sunday in November. And, we would recruit people just from that event. People would come and talk to us. We were able to get them to come on the board and be more involved. That's how we eventually got Camilla Gunnarsson, because she saw us at one of the Respect Life Sunday events. And now her husband is the God works in amazing ways. He's the president of Campaign Life Coalition, so a long ministry for the two of them. And then Joanne Matters, I didn't know her, but somebody said, you have to call Joanne Matters. And so I would call her every year, and she had kids about the same age as mine, quite young. And she'd say, well, I'm not ready yet, but I'm going to get involved. I am going to get involved. And so I'd call her year after year. I was always very persistent. That's something people will remember about me, that I'm very persistent. And so eventually she became our president. And her husband, Deacon Randy, who unfortunately passed away last year, he started Shift for Home. So, God knew the puzzle and knew how to put it all together. And we were just kind of like the tools and the instruments that hopefully did his will and followed along with what he wanted. But back in those days, I'm talking about the 80s and the 90s. And then in the 90s, I was the president of Halton Pro-Life, and Gloria Lawrenson was our executive director. And boy, talk about a fireball. She was an amazing speaker. She was an amazing writer, and she was so convicted. And so we had her come on board, and then she and I were doing these presentations regularly. So in the 90s, Cliff Burns was the director of education at the Halton Catholic School Board, and he was very pro-life, and he used to come to all of our events. And he said that we should Gloria and I should do a presentation to grade 4s up to grade 6 and do a whole assembly in the school and then do the grade 7 and 8. But in those days, we did every Catholic school in the Halton. We did a presentation from grade 4 to 6, and it was just a fun, life-giving, and how much life is worth and how much value children and babies are worth in families. And then we would go to the older ones and we'd do a serious presentation. I would talk about the science of fetal development. Gloria would talk about her personal experience with abortion. And we weren't mincing words. We were telling the kids what was happening. And of course, besides all of that, which Cliff Burns allowed us to do as the director, we also were able to get into all the high schools and talk to usually the religion classes about the value of life and what abortion is and what our church says about it and everything. So we were able to do that for many years. I'm totally convinced, and I'm sure this is the case with Aaliyah and with everyone else who does presentations today, that we are absolutely affecting their young minds because they don't know this information. And sometimes they're upset. Like I taught high school for almost 30 years, and the students are quite upset when they find out what the truth is about what abortion actually is and what it does. And when they find out, they're so upset, they want to be involved and they want to spread the word to others. And that's what Halton Pro-Life and Halton Alive have always been. Their mandate has been to educate others. And that's what our whole raison d'etre has been, with the grace of God to go forward and do that. All we can do now is just keep persevering and keep on, praying and asking God to be with us and to give us the strength to continue with this incredible work that Betty Hammond started in Halton and many, many others, all these other educational groups that started all over Ontario. So just to give us the strength and conviction to keep on going and to know that we are touching these people, whether we see it now or whether we don't. We are planting seeds so that the hearts will be turned towards a pro-life way of thinking, a pro-life way of ethic, and for families to thrive and to welcome any pregnancies and welcome any children into their families. So I just want to thank Aaliyah for this wonderful opportunity and to all the amazing people. I forgot to say, the best people I've ever met in my life are pro-lifers.
Hi, I'm Joanne Matters, and I'm honored to be asked to share a few memories with you about my time with Halton Pro-Life back in the day. It started out a little slowly because Mary Muller had to approach me 3 separate times, 3 separate years in a row to get involved with Halton Pro-Life. And she's a persistent one, thanks be to God, because I have never looked back since the day I stepped foot into the office at Halton Pro-Life and said, what can I do? And you know what? When I look back, Camilla Gunnarsson was there at that time. We worked together. We put presentations together for the schools. We organized walks for life together. We organized dinners. I eventually became the executive director. And you know what? I've got a saying, we don't do life alone. And the team that I worked with in those days was phenomenal, okay? We did this together. And everyone had a part to play. Everyone had a role to play. And I was honored to be working with so many amazing people. A little story about one of the walks for life. My little daughter, Teresa, was only 7 at the time, okay? And she had eggs thrown at her by someone who wasn't very pleased with what we were doing. But you know what? She became a major pro-life leader in her university years. So, these things can happen, but they can also breed a commitment to life. And I'm so grateful for Mary's perseverance to help me understand what it's like to be committed to the life message, to pro-life, to teach the high school students about abortion with truth and honesty and love, to come across with a spirit and a heart of love in those days was so important. And I believe that's why the doors were open to us at the time in the high schools. However, going back in the day, euthanasia wasn't even legalized yet. but it became part of my it became part of my heart to speak about euthanasia in the high schools, even before it was legalized. And before you know it, yes, here we are, euthanasia in Canada. So those were really good days. We organized amazing dinners. We had Jennifer O'Neill, the famous model at that time, come up and share her abortion experience. Funny enough, the participants in the dinner were a little different that year. In fact, some of the union members from the high school actually came to hear Jennifer O'Neill. But those were the days, and they were good days. And the buses that we took to the March for Life every year, one bus one year, the next year 2 buses, the next year 3 buses. Phenomenal team effort by all the pro-life teachers and chaplains that were committing themselves to making sure students had a chance to hear the truth. Just a chance to hear the truth and then do something about it. And the testimonies we heard on the buses on the way home from those Marches for Life were phenomenal. They changed hearts and minds. And I can honestly say I'm so blessed to be able to say and to remember 2 students at the time who are men now, and they're men involved in the pro-life movement at different levels, but on the national level right now here in Canada, that we were introduced to back then and had the opportunity to work with at that time. So there's several good memories of those days, and I'm so grateful to be here celebrating 50 years of Halton Alive. So God bless each and every one of you. Enjoy tonight's celebration. We're all in this together. Thank you.
My name is Wendy Hoffman. My journey with Halton Alive, which was formerly known as Halton Pro-Life, actually began in 2009. I was counseling a young woman who was post-abortive, and she was really struggling with a lot of trauma and distress. She couldn't talk to anybody about it but me. So I thought I better get some help from someone else who's in the pro-life movement. So I thought of Halton Pro-Life, and I dropped into the office and spoke with Marjorie, the executive director at the time. Well, we spoke about everything. We spoke about my practice, we spoke about the work of Halton Pro-Life, and she gave me lots of resources. We talked for an hour and a half. And at the end of that conversation, she said, "You should sit on our board." And I thought, well, I'll consider that. And I did. And I joined the board in March 2010. Well, the next year, in 2011, they asked if they could nominate me to the board as president of the board. Well, I said yes, but with several key objectives that I really believed would take the organization to the next level. They agreed, and we were all excited to embark the journey of restructuring. Well, it was things like a forensic assessment of the organization, best practices, and so on. Board meetings 12 times a year instead of the 9 months. And that raised a few eyebrows because people were thinking they might lose their vacation. Well, no, we didn't lose our vacations, but we were steadfast in having board meetings once a month. And that was so we would never lose momentum. It actually worked out really well, and they enjoyed that. I only missed 1 meeting in all of 13 years on the board, and I enjoyed that. It was my honor to serve. We also started strategic meetings and a vision retreat where we discussed important things we wanted to implement in Halton Alive. At that time it was Halton Pro-Life, and build strong teams for the future, projects, and so on. Most notably, though, was the rebranding that we did for the organization, changing the name to Halton Alive. Well, even just hearing alive inspires hope and interest. It really opened a lot of doors in the community to talk about the good work that we do. Well, this began a 12-year journey as the president of Halton Alive. Last year, I stepped down from the board because we have a bylaw that says you can only do 3 terms. You know what? I still miss being on the board because they're a great board and it was great being on such a strong team. But I know they're in good hands and they're functioning at a very high level, and I appreciate all the work that they do. You know what? It was part of my life for so long, and I still do volunteer whenever I can. Halton Alive is all about the life issues. I like to say it this way, that it's from conception to natural death and everything in between. Our work with the seniors in the region to combat assisted suicide exemplifies this through our Inspire Hope initiative. I know you'll hear more about that this evening and on the website. You know, we all have an innate God-given value for human life. My prayer and my hope is that each of us will be inspired to continue to support Halton Alive in our mission to promote the sanctity of life in this region. I know we have a lot of great years ahead. God bless.